All right, all right. Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Gospel Truth. I'm your host, Marlon Wilson, and we have another exciting debate for you today. We are going to be debating the papacy. Is the papacy true? All right, so we're going to have a fun debate. Hopefully, you guys are looking forward to it. Just making sure, as you guys can see, I'm in a different setup right now. I'm not in my normal setup, and the reason that I'm not in my normal setup is because I am moving. I'm in a process of moving, and so because of that, it has put me in a situation where I don't have my normal setup. All right, so but it's all good. It's all good, and we are jumping on here to have a debate concerning the papacy. Is the papacy true? I have Father Joseph with me, and I have Elijah Yasi, I believe I pronounced that right, with me, and so he will correct me if I am wrong. But we have an exciting debate. So before I bring these guys in, I want to make sure you know to subscribe to the Gospel Truth. Hit that notification bell and that subscription button so you don't and the subscribe button and that notification bell. So you miss out any shows that are coming up here in the future. Also, if you don't know, the Gospel Truth is on other platforms. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter X, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram as well, not just YouTube. And also, the Gospel Truth is on podcasts as well. Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes. So if you guys got those podcasts set up on your phone, you have the ability to listen to the debates and interviews that I have on the Gospel Truth. All right. But also, I just want to let you guys know that I do desire some proceeds. I hate to put it out there like that. Usually I don't have to. But if you don't know, the God's Truth is putting on a debate conference. And that's going to be in February of 2026. So I have some very heavy hitters coming on. I have guys like Anthony Rogers and Trent Horn who are going to be debating Sola Scriptura. I have Dr. James White and Dr. Dustin Smith. They're going to be debating the truthfulness of the Trinity. And I have Elijah versus Eli Ayala. I don't know why I said Elijah. Well, Elijah is going to be debating today. I guess he got the name squashed up there. But Eli Ayala is going to be debating atheist Dan Barker on is the God of the Bible true, or does the God of the Bible exist? And so those are just 3 of 6 debates that I'm going to be hosting at the God's Truth Conference coming up here in February 6th and 7th of 2026. And so hopefully you guys will be able to join us there, because I am looking forward to those debates, that conference, and it'd be exciting to be able to meet you guys face to face. A lot of you guys just being a live chat and things like that. It'd be good to put a face to the names that I see in the live chat, right? And be able to shake your hand. So hopefully you guys will be able to make it. And so yes, proceeds will definitely be welcomed here to prepare for that conference. All right. But all that said, I do want to bring Elijah, and I want to bring Father Joseph in as well, and let them guys introduce themselves to you guys. How's it going, fellas? How y'all doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing good. Did I get your last name right, Elijah? Did I say Yasi? Is that correct?
Yes, you did. Yep.
I did. Oh man, great. Because I'm usually just tearing names up, man. I hope I don't be destroying names at the conference, man. Like, these live events, man. You get up there tearing names up. I'm gonna have to practice that. But all that said, I'm glad you guys have joined me. We've been trying to get this debate together, man. This schedule has been flipping back and forth. My schedule, you guys' schedule, man. Predominantly me, because I'm moving to Texas, so it's been up and at us with it, man. It's been going crazy. But I'm definitely glad we could finally get this debate going. So we're not going to waste any more time. First, we want to do is allow you guys to introduce yourselves to the audience. This is your opportunity to let them know where they can find you. If you just do blogs, tell them where your blog is at. If you do blog, YouTube, and Facebook, and Twitter X, tell them where that's at so they can come check you guys out. All right. Start with Father Joseph. Why don't you go ahead and give us a rundown where everybody can introduce yourself and tell them where they can find you, man.
Sure. Good evening. For those new here, my name is Father Joseph Swaden. I've worked in Orthodox apologetics since 1998. I'm the founder of NFTU, True Orthodox and Ecumenical News, found on nftu.net since 2004. We've been in the apologetic space on Facebook since 2016 and on YouTube since 2018. So, I think that's basically covers most of it.
All right, cool. Thank you once again, Father Joseph. Appreciate you, man. All right, Elijah, this is your chance. Go ahead. You do your thing, man.
Yeah, thank you, Marlon, for having us. And thank you, Father, for being here for this debate. My name is Elijah Yasi, obviously, and I have a YouTube channel called Underground Catholicism. I also have a blog called Underground Catholicism, which I don't post there very often, but I am working on an article about the papacy that I'll be posting there hopefully, God willing, soon. I've been doing this apologetics, not really on YouTube, for like 15 to 20 years, and focusing on the papacy for about 15 years. But the YouTube thing, I think I started it in like 2020 or somewhere around COVID time. So.
All right, cool, guys. So everyone in the live chat, if you got time, go ahead and check them out. Even if you disagree with them, right? It's always good to interact with those you disagree with, so you can represent them properly, man. That's a part of the goal of the gospel truth, is to be able to represent and have proper conversation about things you may disagree with. So with all that said, we're going to jump into this debate, man. So the topic of this debate is the papacy true? Elijah, you're arguing affirmative. Father Joseph, you're arguing negative. And we're going to start that with 15-minute opening statements. We're going to follow that with 5-minute rebuttals. Then we're going to have a 40-minute cross-section. Both of you get 20 minutes each to ask questions. And then we're going to follow that with 5-minute closings. And then we're going to have a 20-minute Q&A from the audience. Sounds good?
Sounds good.
All right. Elijah, you're arguing affirmative this debate, so you are up first. And so let me set you up here. Let me get everybody off the screen here, so you can have the full floor. And you also said you have a presentation, correct?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up real quick.
All right, Elijah. I will start. Let me make sure I get this timer correctly here. Get this timer set so we can be ready to go. So it's a part of having I have my normal rig, man. I have all the stuff already set up, man. I got to do everything by phone for the most part. So
yeah, no
really
worries.
Not having my rig. But all right. I got your time set up, Elijah, and I will start your time as soon as you begin to speak.
All right. Thank you so much for having me again here. So I'll be defending the papacy, obviously. I'm in the affirmative. The first question and the only question I'll be answering today is, why is the papacy necessary? And we're going to get into reasons why it is necessary. But this isn't a debate between Father and Elijah Yasi. This is a debate between Father Joseph Sweden and the early church fathers, because I'll just be quoting the church fathers today. So if he has any issues with what I'm saying, it's going to be taking issues with our own patrimonies, our own fathers, our own saints. And obviously he has the floor to interpret them any way he would like, but he has to represent what his tradition interprets them as. And I'm just going to let them speak for themselves. So number one, the reason number one why the papacy is necessary is because it was instituted by Christ. And really, there's no other reason that you need. I have other reasons that I have about 7 or 8 reasons on here. But the main reason is that it was instituted by Christ. We have St. Maximus Confessor, who says, "These confines of the inhabited world and those throughout the world who confess the Lord in a pious and orthodox manner look straight to the most holy Church of Rome, towards her confession and faith, as to a sun of perennial light, receiving from her the bright splendor of the holy teachings of the fathers, as they were explained piously and in all purity by the 6 holy councils, which were inspired and dictated by God in proclaiming very clearly the symbol of faith. For ever since the word of God condescended to us and became man, all the churches of Christians everywhere have held and hold the great church there as their sole basis and foundation, because according to the very promises of the Lord, the gates of hell have never prevailed over her. But rather she has the keys of the Orthodox faith and confession. She opens the genuine and only piety to those who approach her piously, but closes every heretical mouth and that speaks injustice." So in the blue, I put what I think this is proving or giving evidence to: divine institution and infallibility. Then we go to St. Boniface, who was a pope in the 5th century. He says, "The universal ordering of the church at its birth took its origin from the office of Blessed Peter, in which is found both its directing power and its supreme authority. From him, as from a source, at the time when our religion was in a stage of growth, all churches received their common order. This much is shown by the injunctions of the Council of Nicaea, since it did not venture to make a decree in his regard, recognizing that nothing could be added to his dignity. In fact, it knew that all had been assigned to him by the word of the Lord," divine institution. So it is clear that this church is to all churches throughout the world as a head is to the members, universal head, and that whoever separates himself from it becomes an exile from the Christian religion, since he ceases to belong to its fellowship. And so here we have papal supremacy, we have divine institution, we have the head of the church, we have communion with Rome equals communion with being obviously a Christian. So and the stuff in the blue here, it doesn't just prove the reason that I give. It gives the reason, which here was divine institution, but other reasons as well. And all these reasons will be overlapping. Pope St. Damasus 382, likewise, it is decreed, we have considered that it ought to be announced that although all Catholic churches throughout the world compromise but one bridal chamber of Christ, nevertheless, the Holy Roman Church has been set before the other churches, not by any synodical decrees, but by the evangelical voice of our Lord and Savior. And here he says, the first see, therefore, is that of Peter, the apostle, that of the Roman Church, which has neither stain nor blemish nor anything of the kind. In this universal jurisdiction, divine institution and infallibility is shown here. The reason number two, the headship and source of unity. Rome is the head of the church, and obviously you saw the verses already or passages from the fathers that already speak of the headship of Rome, but here we're going to go into it a little more. So St. Theodore the Studite, writing to Michael II, this is an Eastern father, says, although lately our church is broken off from the 4 patriarchs and has acted lawlessly to no purpose, now is the acceptable time, O Lord, beloved of God. Now is the day of salvation, that we may be reconciled with Christ through the mediation and goodwill of your peaceful ruling majesty, that we may be united with Rome, the head of the churches of God, and through Rome with the other 3 patriarchs. Center of unity, communion with Rome equals reconciliation with Christ. Pope is the head of the churches. Then we have St. Optatus, who says, you cannot then deny that you do know that upon Peter first in the city of Rome was bestowed the episcopal cathedra, on which sat Peter, the head of all the apostles, for which reason he was called Cephas, that in this one cathedra unity should be preserved by all, lest the other apostles might claim each for himself separate cathedrals, so that he who should set up a second cathedra against the unique cathedra would already be a schismatic and a sinner. Well, then on the one cathedra, which is the first of the endowments, Peter was the first to sit. Single headship, one cathedra, source of unity in that cathedra. St. Jerome says, but you say the church was founded upon Peter, although elsewhere the same is attributed to all the apostles, and they all received the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and the strength of the church depends upon them all alike. Yet one among the 12 is chosen, so that when a head has been appointed, there may be no occasion for schism. And that gives the same there. Reason number 3, if the church is split and there is no consensus, recourse is had to Rome. Pope St. Boniface, writing in 422, says, the care of the universal church laid upon him attends to the blessed apostle Peter by the Lord's decree. Again, divine institution is there, which indeed, by the witness of the gospel, he knows to be found on himself, nor can his honor ever be free from anxiety, since it is certain that the supreme authority depends on his deliberation, which things carry my mind even to the regions of the east, which by the force of our solicitude we in a manner behold. As the occasion needs it, we must prove by instances that the greatest Eastern churches in important matters which required greater discussion have always consulted the Roman See, and as often as need arose, asked its help. And here he talks about how in the Melitius and Flavian, it is notorious that the Apostolic See was consulted. And then here he says, the pontiffs of the Eastern churches, grieving at their severance from the communion of Blessed Peter, asked by their legates for reconciliation as your charity remains. I can't read all these quotes in full because of time constraints, but you guys can pause the video later or go watch it afterwards and read the whole quote. I have it all there for you. Recognizing where the true church is, communion with Rome. That if you're in communion with Rome, then you are in the true church according to the Father. St. Jerome says, my words are spoken to the successor of the fisherman, St. Peter to the disciple of the cross. And he's writing to the Pope here. He's writing to Pope Damasus. As I follow no leader save Christ, so I communicate with none but your blessedness. That is with the chair of Peter. For this I know is the rock on which the church is built. This is the house where alone the paschal lamb can be rightly eaten. This is the ark of Noah, and he who is not found in it shall perish when the flood prevails. He that gathers not with you scatters. He that is not of Christ is of the Antichrist. Communion with Rome equals communion with Christ, and the Pope being the center of unity, or the principle of unity. Reason number 5, infallibility and defectibility. I combine these reasons with reason number 6. Because of time constraints, I have to read these quotes here. Reason number 6 and reason number 5 will be together. So this is Pope St. Agatho at the Sixth Ecumenical Council. He says, all therefore I beseech you with a contrite heart and rivers of tears, with prostrated mind, deign to stretch forth your most clement right hand to the apostolic doctrine, which the co-worker of your pious labors, the blessed apostle Peter, has delivered that it be not hidden under a bushel, but that it be preached in the whole earth more shrilly than a bugle, because the true confession thereof, for which Peter was pronounced blessed by the Lord of all things, was revealed by the Father of heaven, for he received from the Redeemer of all himself, again, divine institution, by 3 commendations, the duty of feeding the spiritual sheep of the church, universal primacy, or supremacy, or Roman primacy, under whose protecting shield this apostolic church of his, so he's applying that to Rome, has never turned away from the path of truth in any direction of error. And here you have infallibility or indefectibility. And then going forward, he says, for this is the rule of the true faith, which this spiritual mother of your most tranquil empire, the apostolic church of Christ, has both in prosperity and in adversity always held and defended with energy, which it will be proved by the grace of Almighty God has never erred from the path of the apostolic tradition, nor has she been depraved by yielding to heretical innovations, but from the beginning she has received the Christian faith from her founders, the princes of the apostles of Christ, and remains undefiled unto the end. So it's in perpetuity, according to the divine promise of the Lord and Savior himself, which he uttered in the holy Gospels to the prince of his disciples, saying, Peter, Peter, behold, Satan has desired to have you, that he might sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith fail not. And notice that he takes the Petrine passages and he applies them to the Apostolic See of Rome. All right. So that shows divine institution, infallibility, immovable foundation, permanent office, universal jurisdiction. Theodore the Studite says, leading see, he's talking about Rome, where Christ has placed the keys of faith, against which the gates of hell have not prevailed from the beginning, nor will they prevail to the end. This is an Eastern father. This is an Eastern saint. He's a huge saint in the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholic Church. That is to say, the mouths of the heretics, as he has promised, who does not lie. Reason number 7, Rome is absolutely necessary for a universally binding decree. St. Peter Chrysologus, who received a letter and a petition from Eutychus in the controversy between, preceding the Chalcedonian Council, or the Council of Chalcedon, he says, we exhort you to, he's writing to Eutychus, we exhort you in every respect, honorable brother, to heed obediently what has been written by the most blessed Pope of the city of Rome. For blessed Peter, who lives and presides in his own see, provides the truth of faith to those who seek it. For we, by reason of our pursuit of peace and faith, cannot try cases on the faith without the consent of the Bishop of Rome. So the Bishop of Rome is absolutely necessary. Socrates, who is a Greek historian writing in the 5th century, says, neither was Julius, Bishop of the Great Rome, there, nor had he sent a substitute, although an ecclesiastical canon commands that the churches shall not make any ordinances against the opinion of the Bishop of Rome. And then in conclusion, I have one last quote here. St. Maximus the Confessor, he says, the apostolic throne, which is from the incarnate Son of God himself, and which, in accordance with the holy canons and the definitions of faith, received from all the holy councils universal and supreme dominion, authority, auctoritatem, and the power, potestas, over all of God's churches throughout the world to bind and loose. And I think I saved the best for this. Is one of the best for me. This is the best because it shows divine institution, which is from the incarnate Son of God. It shows infallibility. He has the power to teach, to bind, and to loose. Supremacy. And then it says auctoritas and potestas, right? So, you can't say, oh, that's just auctoritas power. No, he says both. And that's St. Maximus Confessor. That is an Eastern saint. Obviously, it's also a Catholic saint, but in the Eastern Orthodox Church, this is like how we view Augustine. They view St. Maximus Confessor. This is a huge saint for Eastern Orthodoxy. So to conclude all this, I would say that Father today has a task. If he is going to pose the question as to why the papacy is necessary, the answers I'm giving here are from the fathers. So this isn't Elijah Yassi's opinion. This isn't Elijah Yassi's answer. This is these are the fathers, right? And the first reason that I gave is really the sufficient reason and the only reason that I need. I went a little bit more than that, obviously, but the first reason is because Christ instituted this papacy, this Roman see. So the burden of proof, I believe, has been satisfied to show why the papacy is necessary. And I've gone further than that and shown where they believe it's infallible, has supreme power. It has power over the whole church and not just the patriarch. It's not just over the West. And I have 1 minute left. And the one thing I do want to read, of course, as you guys know me, is the letter of the Swiss bishops, which was approved by Pope Pius IX. And this is the papacy that I'm defending. They say the definition of the council, thank you, has not in any respect brought about a separation between the head and the members of the teaching body in the church. As much as the East want us to think that the Vatican I brought about a separation, the Swiss bishops said no, and the Pope approved this interpretation of Vatican I. After the council, as before, the popes will exercise their office as doctors and chief pastors in the church, without forgetting that the bishops are appointed with them by the Holy Spirit. So also in the government of the church, never will they undertake anything which concerns the universal church without taking the counsel and advice of the bishops, as they did before the council, so now also afterwards will the popes summon councils, ask the advice of the bishops scattered over the world, use every means in their power to obtain a full understanding respecting that deposit of faith which has been confided to the church. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Elijah, for that opening statement. All right, Father Joseph, you're up next for your opening statement as well. And so let me get Mr. Yasi off the screen, and we're gonna bring Father Joseph on the screen. All right, if you don't mind, Elijah, if you could stop sharing your screen. I think you need to, I don't know if I can stop it. Oh, there you go. All right, thank you so much, Elijah, for that. All right, Father Joseph, you're up next for your 15-minute opening statement, and you also have a presentation to share as well. So if you want to start sharing that before I start your time, that'd be cool. I think you're muted too, Father Joseph. I can't hear you.
Okay, sorry about that.
Mhm.
Okay, it's gonna, here we go. Let's see if it works. All right, so, okay, I'm gonna put that up. It's the beginning here. So just let me start by saying, today we'll be having this debate on the significance of one of the oldest institutions in the world, the papacy, which heads the Roman Catholic Church. The seriousness of this question is one that we're aware of, is of grave importance, and our debate tonight will have an impact on souls. So it is one we have to take seriously. The question of whether the papacy is true presupposes the question of what the papacy is. If we, as Orthodox Christians, have always understood it to be an office of the church, if, presuming no heresy is involved, is historically the most spiritually important historical office of the church by virtue of her age and many saints over the centuries. So indeed, the question of whether the papacy is true ties directly into the question of the necessity of the papacy throughout the church universal. If the papacy is correct on their claims, we must join her. If the papacy's claims are falsified, then the papacy, due to scriptural mandates and history itself, we're to have nothing to do with it. Thus, this is a question of whether the papacy is necessary for the governance of the church. Thus, let us begin with the scriptures and begin the process of discussing the history of the church. As you can see on the screen, all of it hinges ultimately upon the meaning of the words. Also, I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. As we go through this, give me just a moment here. 1 second. Okay, hold on. Having a little bit of a technical difficulty. Give me a moment. Let's kill that. Okay. Let's see here. Just got to pull it up on the screen. It's okay. I probably should have started my time. All right, so I'm going to guess. I'll just go with the 1 minute thing. All right, so we've looked upon the verse in question, but when we look at it, we see here that this is a commentary of St. John Chrysostom. It's the direct commentary on the meaning of Matthew 16:18. So it says, "What saith Christ? Thou art Simon, the son of Jonas, thou shalt be called Cephas. Since thou hast proclaimed my Father, I too name him that begat thee. All but saying, As thou art son of Jonas, even so am I of my Father. Else it would be superfluous to say thou art son of Jonas, but because he said son of God, to point out that he is son of God, as the other son of Jonas, of the same substance of him that begat him. Therefore he added this, and I say unto thee, Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. That is on the faith of his confession. It is not upon Peter. Here he signifies that many more were on the point of believing, and raises his spirit and makes him a shepherd. And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And if not against it, much more not against me. So be not troubled, because thou art shortly to hear that I am to be betrayed and crucified. And he goes through this. He goes through the keys of the kingdom of heavens. He even mentions at the end that that is also provided to the other apostles by Matthew 18:18. But nowhere does it talk about the authority of Peter. It talks about Peter's confession of faith, and his faith being the reason why why the name change was necessary. If I may, I'm going to just switch right over to St. Augustine. Again, these are just commentaries on the scriptures themselves. And what we see is that he says one more. Let me see if I can just, I think I moved it. But again, let's see here. Gonna just check for confession. And on this account, the Lord said, On this rock I will build my church, because Peter had said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. On this rock, therefore, he said, which thou hast confessed, I will build my church. For the rock, Petra, was Christ, and on this foundation Peter himself also built. For no other foundation can no man lay that is laid, which is Christ Jesus. Are we starting to see a pattern here? What we notice is that the early fathers are very clear that the meaning of Matthew 16:18 was on his faith. Among other fathers, we could name Saint Hilary of Poitiers, the Trinity, the sixth book, Saint Gregory of Nyssa, on the passage on the Advent of our Lord, Saint Ambrose, book 6, on chapter 9 of Luke, and on the second chapter of the Epistle to the Ephesians. For Orthodox listeners, if you're wondering what I'm reading from, that is from, of course, the Schismatic Papacy, or the Papacy in English, by Abba Goutet, which lists numerous fathers who talk about the rock being Peter's faith. And so what that means, as you can see here, there it is, there's a listing. What that means is that the context of what Matthew 16:18 means isn't based upon a specific office, not even upon a specific man. It's based upon the faith of the church. This is shown in virtually all the early fathers. So if we go up to, we're going up to, like, what we would have to prove is that if the Pope, what my opponent has to prove is that if the Pope has the authority throughout the history of the church to act as its center of unity, etc., that should be obvious in the fathers, but it isn't. Here we have Eusebius's ecclesiastical history, and it talks about what happened during the Quartodeciman controversy. This was a controversy that involved a question of the calendar. And Pope Victor, who presided over the church at Rome, immediately attempted to cut off from the common unity all the parishes of Asia, with the churches that agreed with him. It should be obvious that if the Pope had this power, because this is within the apostolic period. St. Irenaeus is from the 2nd century. But St. Irenaeus himself, among many other bishops, actually rebuke the Pope and admonish him that the church unity hadn't been ruptured like that, even though they had a difference of opinion, which would eventually be resolved at the Council of Nicaea, where everyone took on the custom of the council. For those wondering, the Quartodecimans held to an exact date position. In other words, Christ's death and resurrection occurred at a specific time, and so they use that time so Pascha can technically fall any day, whereas the majority of the church said no, it has to be on the Sunday, on the resurrection. So let us continue on. So we already have, obviously, the root of the disagreement visible there in just the 2nd century. But we move forward 300 years, and we move to the 3 chapters controversy. This occurred when Pope, I want to say Vigilius, but I might be wrong. I'm pretty sure it's Vigilius. So apparently rejected 3 books that were accepted at the Council of Chalcedon. And so the bishops of many Western provinces, this isn't an Eastern thing, this is a Western thing, ended up breaking communion with the Pope and rejecting communion with him for 160 years. Now, they were still in the church, and there's even a lot of very interesting stuff that happens throughout that period. Even saints like Gregory the Great, etc., tried to resolve this schism, but they still remained in communion, even elected a patriarchate in Aquileia to counter the papacy. This shouldn't be possible if these people all believe that unity of with the Pope is a prime criterion of unity. It's not. And you have the Patriarchate of Grado, which actually split in the Patriarchate of Aquileia. So you had 2 patriarchates, one of which agreed with the Pope, one of which didn't. And that wasn't resolved. And so that lasted 160 years. We can talk about the schism of 869 with Pope Nicholas against St. Photius. But maybe that's another time. What we do know here is that St. Gregory the Great actually, condemned the concept of a universal bishop. He actually considered it, he said, if one supposes is universal bishop, that means you're not bishop, not bishops. And that was St. Gregory the Great. Unfortunately, in the intervening period of the council, between then and the Great Schism between Rome and Orthodoxy. One moment. Pope Gregory VII, or Hildebrand of Savannah, as you can see by number 2, decided that, universal bishops were a thing. This is actually where we talk about the real invention of Roman Catholicism, where we talk about the papacy as we understand it as a monarchy over the church. This is really where it began in 1075, right around the period of the Great Schism, and also the rise of the age of amulets. But anyway, so we move up to 1274, about 200 years after Hildebrand and his civil wars ended up destroying the unity of the church in the West. And we move forward to the Second Council of Lyon, which I'm going to try to speed up here. But basically, this was the first attempt to get the Orthodox, who had been separated from Rome for 200 years, to be reunited. It didn't work. So that was too bad. But that 10 years later, the Synod of Blachernae basically condemned the Filioque heresy, condemned anyone following it. They knew who that meant. So we move forward in time to 1431, 1445, with the Council of Florence, where they attempted to reunite Rome, the Roman papacy, with the Byzantine Empire and the Orthodox Church, and it failed. And they achieved nothing. So what they did was they used that as a template for unions. And so they did unions with, they attempted to do unions with the Coptic Monophysites, with an Nestorian, so on and so forth. I believe my opponent's church actually comes from those unions. It occurred about 100 years after the Council of Florence, using the same template. And then there were the Slavic things. And then we get to during all this, you have the Hussites, and the Hussites basically were at war with the papacy. And it turns out that they were kind of proto-Protestant. By the time the whole Hussite controversy went into full swing, you had basically you had Martin Luther and the Reformation started. So then hold on one moment, trying to find it. Is this allowed? Yeah. So then we get to, if we can, we get to the Council of Trent, which is basically the underpinnings of the Roman Catholic Church as we have today and the papacy we have today. Papacy's position was solidified. Baroque art became a thing, and more amulets. I can't stress enough how often this happens, but the amulets stop around Vatican II because they just basically say you can keep the amulets, but you're not allowed to have them. 200 years after this, the Eastern Patriarchates are still tired of dealing with the papacy, writing a long letter in 1848, replying to Pope Pius IX to the Easterns. But just a few years later, the papacy tries a whole new power where now they can actually codify dogmas. And so they codify the dogma of the Immaculate Conception in 1854. This is causing massive confusion. The Old Catholic split happens. The First Vatican Council has to be held in the middle of a lot of war. And so that's where they kind of solidify a bunch of stuff. It's Elijah's favorite topic. He's studied it for years and years, as he mentioned, which is great. And then we ultimately... this is where they kind of define the power of the Pope's infallibility, something that I really didn't exist until after the Tridentine period. It was not even a real consideration until the 1600s. So this period in history is where we move from a monarchical Pope to an infallible monarchical Pope. And then the whole thing starts falling apart with the Second Vatican Council, because then all the cards are thrown out the window. Everything is going. They try to basically do an aggiornamento or a rebirth, or an updating of the church, and it does not go nearly as well as people have planned. Unfortunately, I'm not going to go into all the stories. We all know all the changes. There's whole traditionalists that movements that want to keep the Latin Mass. People can keep the amulets, but officially the Vatican doesn't believe in them anymore. A lot of the things that have been changed, ultimately, I hate to say this, but it finally, it gets to here where there's virtually no distinguishable metric versus in the Roman Catholic Church versus the world. It's about the same. And this is the end result of it, because what has happened is they've left the beliefs of the Apostolic Orthodox faith, which continued to survive throughout time. I didn't have time to put comparative numbers or anything like that. But I believe that's the heart of it. In the end, it really just comes down to whether or not, hold on one moment, whether or not, the papacy is good or bad, or true or not. Did the church need it? Historically, the answer is no. And I'm willing to talk to Elijah, and let's hash it out and see what he has to say about that.
All right. Thank you so much for that opening statement of you guys, for the opening statement. And so now we're going to transition to our rebuttal rounds. Rebuttal rounds will be 5 minutes each. And so start with Elijah. You're up first for your 5-minute rebuttal. And once again, I will start your time as soon as you begin to speak.
All right. Thank you so much, Father, for that. I hope you guys noticed my presentation went first, but it already addressed his presentation, and there's no way for me to know what he was going to present. But the question of, is the papacy necessary? That wasn't the debate topic. That was just kind of what I thought he was going to ask, and that's why I answered the question. So he talks about Peter's confession being where the church is built, not Peter as the rock, or Peter not being the rock. It's his confession. So I'm going to read Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 552. That says, Simon Peter holds the first place in the college of the 12. Jesus entrusted a unique mission to him. Through a revelation from the Father, Peter had confessed, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Our Lord then declared to him, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it." Christ, the living stone, thus assures his church, built on Peter, of victory over the powers of death. Because of the faith he confessed, Peter will remain the unshakable rock of the church. Because of the faith he confessed. His mission will be to keep this faith from every lapse and to strengthen his brothers in it. So there is no problem for us to say that it was Peter's confession and Peter himself where the church is built. It's a both and so that's why I had fathers quoting, literally saying that Peter is a rock. They didn't say it was his confession. And one of the fathers was Saint Jerome. He says, "For this I know is the rock on which the church is built." Um, so that's Saint Jerome, right? You also have other fathers that I quoted who talk about Peter, that Christ built the church on Peter, right? So this isn't Elijah Yasi, right? So again, this isn't a debate between like father and I. This is the debate between the fathers and father. Because I'm just quoting the fathers. I mean, obviously, I quoted the catechism here, but that's just to prove a point, not to show that any proof from the catechism, but just to show that there's no problem with saying that it was Peter's confession. He talked about, sorry, I lost my page. Let's see. He talked about the universal primate from the Dictatus Papam in 1075 that started in 1075, supposedly. I quoted fathers that talk about uh, the headship or the universal headship of the Bishop of Rome, especially the popes who believed they had this universal care for the world. And I ended it with, like I said, one of my favorite quotes, St. Maximus the Confessor, who says, "The apostolic throne, which is from the incarnate Son of God himself, and which, in accordance with the holy canons and the definitions of the faith, received from all the holy councils, universal and supreme dominion." That's not 1075. This is in the middle of the 7th century. And I can go back even before that and show more proof, but St. Maximus suffices for both of us. Universal and supreme dominion, authority, and the power over all of God's churches throughout the world to bind and loose. So there is a sense in which a universal bishop is rejected. It's that bishop or the pope who replaces every bishop in their local diocese. That's not what Vatican I taught. This universal bishop cares for the church. So when he sees something wrong, he goes and addresses it. Doesn't mean he addresses it alone, but he addresses it either with the church or sometimes alone, as the excommunication of Celestine to Nestorius was from the See of Rome alone, right? And we'll talk about that too on the cross-examination. He talked about papal infallibility not starting until the 16th century. I quoted fathers. Again, I put it in blue, what I'm trying to prove, and you guys can go back and watch the presentation. I quoted fathers that talk about the Roman infallibility or the infallibility of Rome, right? And one of them, again, was St. Maximus the Confessor. Another one was Saint.
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. Pope Saint Agatha, which was at an ecumenical council, right? So this isn't just a pope saying this. This is a champion of orthodoxy saying, having a letter read at the ecumenical council. But I'm going to read, what's his name? Saint Maximus the Confessor, if I can find it, as the last thing here before I end this. These confines of the inhabited world. Well, let me just read this. "For ever since the word of God condescended to us and became man, all the churches of Christians everywhere have held and hold the great church there as their sole basis and foundation, because according to the very promises of the Lord, the gates of hell have never prevailed over her. But rather she has the keys of the Orthodox faith and confession. She opens the genuine and only piety to those who approach her piously, but closes every heretical mouth that speaks injustice." So everything he addressed there, I've already addressed in my presentation. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right. Thank you so much for that rebuttal. All right, Father Joseph, you're up for your 5-minute rebuttal as well. And the same thing with you as I did with Elijah. We'll start your time as soon as you begin to speak.
Okay, thank you for that. So basically, one of the problems that we have is in clarifying the fathers. Folks like my opponent, very simply, Roman Catholics, etc., often have baked in presuppositions of what the fathers mean. And so I noticed that there was a lot of emphasis on Saint Maximus, which I found really, really interesting, because Saint Maximus the Confessor's life is extremely instructive. At one point, there is the assumption that basically he is arguing with envoys of Constantinople, who are threatening him and saying that, what will you do? You're going to stay by yourself with the Pope. Well, we're going to meet the Pope. And they actually say, what will you do, inquired the envoys, when the Romans are united to the Byzantines? Yesterday, 2 delegates arrived from Rome, and tomorrow, the Lord's Day, they will communicate the holy mysteries with the Patriarch. The saint replied, even if the whole universe maintains communion with the Patriarch, I will not communicate with him. For I know from the writings of the Holy Apostle Paul, the Holy Spirit declares that even the angels would be anathema if they should preach another gospel, introducing some new teaching. My opponent in his introduction talked about Pope Damasus and the idea of stain and blemish never touching the Roman Church. But what about the case of Honorius? That's true with St. Agatho as well, who had just experienced, they had already experienced the horror of Honorius's heresy, his monophilitism. So bad was it that even though St. Agatho is talking about the papal, the See of Rome without stain and blemish, they introduced an oath into the papal elections to anathematize Honorius on every single claimant to the papacy until the 11th century. So that's how seriously they took it. I saw mention of St. Theodore the Studite, but I think that's playing fast and loose. If you look at the rule of St. Theodore the Studite, he actually uses Matthew 16:18 to refer to the role of the abbot. St. Optatus arguing against the basically, I think that he's overplaying this here, Elijah, is because really St. Optatus's main argument against the Donatists was that they were just a few scattered foreigners in an empty church compared to the actual church that was in Rome. So I get that argument, but it's not nearly as pro-papal as one would say as it is anti-Donatist. We can talk about the case of St. Meletius because the Pope actually recognized Paulinus of Antioch, as opposed to St. Meletius. So ironically, even that choice of quote was not exactly great. Now on to the recent rebuttal. I noticed that Elijah is trying to say that it's not an and or, it's a both and or an either or. It's actually an either or, because in both of those passages from Chrysostom and Augustine that I put on the screen, you can clearly say that they say that Peter was not the rock. He was on the rock of Christ, which means it's not a both and. It's an and or. Other than that, I would just say that a lot of this is going to be decoding and taking apart these passages, just like I just did now, because one can get an inflated meaning of what something is when, in fact, that's not actually the case at all. So, as I have on the screen here, St. Maximus the Confessor, as much as he was loyal to the Orthodox papacy when it was Orthodox, the second that there was any possibility of the preaching of heresy, St. Maximus wanted nothing to do with it. So I think that that's pretty much all I have to say on the matter. And let me see here. What's my time now?
About 44 seconds.
Okay. In that case, what I will say is what we need to do is establish the necessity of the papacy. I don't believe historically that can be done. We go through just in the pre-schism period, 160 years, you could be out of communion with the papacy and it's okay. It sounds like maybe they didn't understand things like Elijah.
All right, that's it, Father.
Yep.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, both of you guys, for the openings and the rebuttals. And so now we're going to jump into cross-examination. I'm sure this will be a fascinating cross-examination. So, audience, I suggest that you definitely keep the focus, pay attention because what's being said, because both of these guys are fast, very fast, a lot of information being dispensed. So, that said, we're going to jump into it. This will be a 40-minute cross-ex. Both of you get 20 minutes each to ask questions. Elijah, you'll be starting the cross-ex with your 20-minute cross-examination. And with the cross-examination, I do expect you guys to question, answer. If you guys decide to press an issue, go for it, right? I just don't want any red herrings. I don't want any ad hominems. I don't want to be able to have to step in and stop the conversation or threaten to just discontinue the debate altogether because of rude behavior. So you guys have the floor. Elijah, you have 20 minutes to cross-examine Father Joseph. And I'll start your time when you begin to ask your first question.
Thank you so much. So I quoted Saint Optatus, but this seems to be the theme of the fathers, who said that there is a single chair or cathedra in which Peter sat, and the Bishop of Rome sits today, and the purpose of this chair is so that there is one head in order for divisions to not arise. What does he mean by that, and how does one chair equate to avoiding divisions?
Well, I think in the context of Saint Optatus in that particular case, it's because they set up another chair. Like there's whole chapters devoted to the second chair that they set up in Rome and how pitiful it was compared to the actual Orthodox chair at Rome. So that's something.
Was it wrong for them to set up a second chair?
They believed that obviously they believed that the Orthodox were heretical because of their position. We don't have to go over Donatism, obviously.
So the ones that set up a second chair were heretics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much.
So his logic, you would say, is that there can only be one chair and you can't have more than one chair. Would you
right.
agree with
It's
that?
one bishop, one city. Yeah.
Okay. So one bishop. So what's the purpose of having one bishop and one chair? So you haven't answered that.
Well, if you look in Saint Ignatius, I mean, the chair is the center of Eucharistic unity. The bishop is the icon of Christ. All the priests get their powers from the bishop, etc. And the bishop retains the apostolic succession, as is in Saint Irenaeus.
So, but for Saint Optatus, he's saying that one chair resides in Rome. He specifically singles out Rome.
Yeah.
So he's not talking about every bishop, like you're saying, right? So what is he saying here? I mean,
I would argue that he's doing an example par excellence by using Rome. Just like St. Irenaeus uses Rome as a perfect example for apostolic succession, St. Optatus is using Rome as the perfect example because the Donatists obviously didn't just set up a schism in Rome. They set up a schism everywhere. And so his point is, let's look at Rome and let's look at you in Rome. And that's what's wrong here.
So let me unpack this and let me know if this is your logic.
Yeah, sure.
So what you're saying here is that Saint Optatus is saying that this single chair belongs to Rome as an example, but there are many other chairs out there that also belongs to each bishop, right?
Well, I would say that he's saying that the Bishop of Rome there is the legitimate bishop, and setting up a chair there is illegitimate, and this is why it's obviously illegitimate, as a perfect example for the rest.
So would you look at Antioch, and would you say that's another single chair in Antioch?
Obviously, yes. Mm-hmm.
So he's saying, so his logic here is that there is a single chair so that divisions may not arise.
Right.
But this single chair is everywhere. That's
the single chair is in every city where there is a true bishop. Yeah.
That would go against his very logic to avoid divisions. Because if you have many chairs, then you have divisions where you say, okay, who's the head? Who's the single chair that we can look to? Which is what the point he's making is.
I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the passage again, but I'm not sure I'm willing to cede that. I'm arguing that basically, like Saint Irenaeus argued before him, he's using the Bishop of Rome as an exemplar of the Orthodox parties and why the schisms of the Donatists were problematic. So yeah, I would say that in the sense that Rome represents the one chair, Orthodox Rome, then yeah, in Rome and in Antioch, it represents the Orthodox party in Antioch, and setting up counter churches when in fact there's no real cause for division because it mostly is just anger on their part or indignation about sin,
right?
A desire to be Puritan. So
it just seems to me that would go against his very logic of that single chair is to avoid divisions. But I want to move on to Saint Jerome because it's the same. I'll give you a chance.
Absolutely.
And he's more explicit. He says, "My words are spoken to the successor of the fisherman." He's writing to the Pope, to the disciple of the cross. "As I follow no leader save Christ, so I communicate with none but your blessedness. That is with the chair of Peter. For this I know is the rock on which the church is built. This is the house where alone the paschal lamb can be rightly eaten. This is the ark of Noah, and he who is not found in it shall perish when the flood prevails. He that gathers not with you scatters. he that is not of Christ is of the Antichrist. So his logic seems to be single chair, single bishop that he has to be in communion with in order to eat he says the lamb, the Paschal lamb, and to be in the church. So for him, that's the Pope. It's no one else. It's the Pope. So if he's in communion with the Pope, then he's in communion with Christ. How do you interpret this?
Oh, wow. There's a lot to unpack with Saint Jerome. First off, I'm sure you know about Saint Jerome's biography. He was originally a Roman monastic who was he wasn't in Jerusalem. He moved to Jerusalem on the request of the Pope, etc. But this letter was written in a period you remember we were talking about, well, you mentioned Meletius of Antioch, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
He actually goes through in this letter and literally says, I'm not with this person. I'm not with Lucifer, which many people assume to be Satan, but it's actually Lucifer of Cagliari.
Right.
And so the whole point is he's like, he already hated half of these. He didn't like the Meletians. He didn't like the Paulinians. So on and so forth. He's just like, I'm just in communion with you because I know the papacy. This is okay. This is safe. All these people are losers. And I mean, he uses really rough language akin to calling them losers and stuff like that. But the whole point is he's making the point that he knows the faith is safe in Rome and he can't trust any of these horrible people, even though many of them were saints, but that's the way he was acting.
Okay. Did Christ institute the papacy?
Christ instituted the church, and the confession of faith is the basis of the church. I don't believe that the papacy. I used to think maybe there was evidence, but the more you look at every case, the more I find is that these are often references to the faith itself. So yeah, I don't believe Christ instituted the papacy specifically. I believe he instituted the episcopate.
So did some of the fathers that I quote teach that Christ instituted the papacy?
I would say that they are open to interpretation. Some of them actually will reverse.
I mean,
what they're
that's
saying.
what we're here for. So you tell me. So I can read one right now, right? I can. So let's look at Saint Maximus, the Confessor. He says, "For ever since the Word of God condescended to us and became man, all the churches of Christians everywhere have held and hold the great church there as their sole basis and foundation, because according to the very promises of the Lord." He's talking about the church there being Rome. So you can't say it's, every church, right? The gates of hell have never prevailed. I'm sorry. But rather she has the keys of the Orthodox faith and confession. And then I've read that quote like 3 times already, so I'm not going to go into it. But he's saying Christ is the one that instituted it to that specific Rome, See of Rome. He's not saying the whole church. How do you interpret it?
I take that because remember, this is around the period with St. Martin and the Lateran Council of 649. They know that they're not able to do an ecumenical council without the whole church and without the permission of the emperor, but they decide to fake it anyway. And so, like, even Pope St. Martin.
Did St. Maximus think this was an ecumenical council?
St. Maximus tried to declare it an ecumenical council. I believe Pope St. Martin said we tried, but it's not.
Is that what he said? That's not what St. Martin said.
Well, we can get into the quotes about St. Martin, but the moral of the story, and this is why I brought this up to you, Elijah, is because when confronted with the possibility that the Pope would commune with the Monothelites, Maximus said, then I will commune with no one.
No, okay, but he's singling out Rome. So forget all the things that you're saying insofar as what you're contextualizing. He is still taking Christ's words and saying it applies to Rome.
Yeah,
what do you do with that? What do you do with it? So he's not applying it to every bishop. Yeah,
well, it's right, and I know he's not, and he is specifically arguing for Rome for the doctrinal reason that the papacy was anti-monothelite at the time.
So that's the only reason why he's saying.
I'm arguing that he was basically propagandizing.
So this is sophistry. You're not arguing.
I don't know if it's sophistry. It's
because you're not bringing me anything to say this is what he believed and this is why. This is your opinion.
I did.
You're reading that into him.
But I did.
How?
I did bring something. I brought the life of St. Maximus up.
Okay, the way I look at life of St. Maximus from your example is
how do you turn that? How do you interpret
sure.
that?
And I'm not supposed to say answer, but I'll form it into a question. So,
sorry. Okay.
No. It's I'm glad you're allowing me to do this, so I appreciate it.
I'm not very good at these cross-examination things. I don't quite understand them. So.
That's okay. That's same. So you have Rome, who was the only Orthodox patriarchate at the time with St. Maximus, right? So for him, he's looking at the situation, and again, you said open to interpretation. This is how I'm looking at it. It doesn't have to be the way you're looking at it. There's other things you can look at. He's looking at it as Rome is the only Orthodox patriarchate at the time.
Yeah.
So that's begging the question when you say he thinks that Rome is Orthodox because Rome is Orthodox at the time. But I'm thinking he thinks Rome is Orthodox because of the very passage he's quoting you from Christ himself, saying that the gates of hell shall never prevail against her. And he's applying that to Rome. And he's saying that Rome is Orthodox because of what Christ said to Peter and instituted that papacy on Peter. That's what he's saying. That's his logic. It goes against what you're saying.
Well,
How do you look at that?
I would argue that what he's actually doing is he is trying to get everyone to remember how important Rome is because of their teaching.
It's not just
And
important. Again, he's applying the words of Christ to Rome. That's a passage of the Bible. He's saying that applies to you, Pope. This Pope guy.
I get
Yeah.
that part, but the point is, if we accept that the life is correct and it's real, then we must accept that he has an acceptive clause to that about Rome, namely that if Rome does not confess orthodoxy, then Rome will fall too. He clearly indicates that. So, in other words, the office itself is still tethered to the Orthodox faith, and
So-
Rome was, as you mentioned, the only patriarchate holding the Orthodox faith at the time, and so that's how I see it.
So when he was first presented with this, he did not believe that's what Rome held to. Obviously, he was lied to, right? This was a lie that they were.
Yeah, they
giving him.
lied to. Yeah, they
lied to
were
him.
lying to him. It was
They were lying to him, saying, "Oh, Rome is now monothelite." They're lying to him.
And what did he say? But what he said back was, "Then I'll be in communion with nobody."
Sure, but that's based on a lie. Of course, if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, Pope Leo is going to ex cathedra that gay people can now be married in the Catholic Church,"
Okay,
I'm out. That's first of all, I'll be like, "No,
I'm waiting for you, buddy.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for you.
So there's no like problem there. Okay, but
the
let's move
scary
on.
part. I mean, you brought up a scary example because that is, at least in my mind, possible.
Okay, sure. I mean, that's not the debate today, so we can.
Yeah, obviously. No.
So, did Saint Maximus believe that Rome had power over all the churches?
Well, yeah, because they were Orthodox. Correct.
Now, he's not saying that because they're Orthodox. He's just saying that they have power over all of God's churches throughout the world.
And I have to keep adding the conditional because his concern was primarily with the preservation of the Orthodox faith, and that was the same mission as Saint Martin.
Okay, so what about the popes that say that Rome has universal care and universal authority over the whole churches? Are they saying that just because they're saying, "Oh, because we're Orthodox, we believe that," or do they actually believe that?
I believe that because when we're talking about the Orthodox Pope, Saint Leo the Great, Gregory the Great, if we want to contextualize, that it's basically because they feel a responsibility to protect the faith. That is something that Rome, with very few limited exceptions before the 11th century, was zealous to preserve, was the preservation of the faith and the orthodoxy of the faith. So that would be, that would be the background understanding to whatever claims that they're making. So that, that's how I read it, because it seems that that's how they meant it.
Did anybody in the first millennium believe that Rome was the head of the church or the head of the universal church?
I would say generally no. The closest, because even like if we take Saint Gregory the Great with the universal bishop, I would say his view was emblematic of that. The views of Saint Leo, for example, if you go through his letters to the patriarchs of Antioch and Alexandria, he holds that the See of Peter is triune, so that it's actually a see of three places in one, which is why he got so offended with Constantinople taking the second place. I would say that there's a lot of examples of Rome mostly being regarded as, they're usually regarded highly in the West and during times of heretical crisis with the ecumenical councils. It's not always true, because at one point St. Meletius did have an imperial council, which would become a third council of Constantinople, I believe. But then really not, you don't even Pope Nicholas versus St. Photius, Both of them are more interested in being in fidelity to the canons. Unfortunately, for Pope Nicholas, that was around the time of Anastasius the librarian when they started changing canons. So I would say, yeah, it was a totally much more decentralized system, and everyone had their own accolades, and Rome had a lot more than most.
Okay, so Pope St. Boniface says, the care of the universal church laid upon him attends to the blessed apostle Peter by the Lord's decree. And then he says, since it is certain that the supreme authority depends on his deliberation, which things carry my mind even to the regions of the east. And then he says, the pontiffs of the eastern churches, grieving at their severance from this communion of blessed Peter, asked by their legates for reconciliation as your charity remains. What does he mean here? It's clearly to me,
It sounds like, now, is he responding to legates who are heretical? Because it sounds like he's warning them in that sense. And what I mean is that St. Boniface, I'd have to see the full context of the
context. The context of this quote is the Illyrium split. How half of Illyrium is in Constantinople and the other half is in Rome, or like in the West. So it's like it's a two. So half of it goes to Constantinople, half of it goes to the West.
Yeah, but if I remember correctly, Illyrium was originally a Roman dependency, so it was taken away from them.
Correct.
So yeah, that context there seems to be that obviously, that's an appeal to justice. I think for the most part, I think that's a fair reading.
Well, what does he mean by the care of the universal church? No, just before I keep in mind, he gives examples of Athanasius going to Julius and being reinstated, right? So he's giving examples of Eastern regions where this is happening, right? Where this issue of the East having like their patriarchs deposed and they come to Rome and they get reinstated. So he's giving examples of these things, right? And as an example of like Rome has the authority to do this outside of their Western patriarchate jurisdiction. That's his logic here. But you're saying that wasn't taught in the first millennium, but he's clearly teaching that, or else how do you look at this?
Well, I would say that first off, the responsibility towards all the flock is the responsibility of any bishop. You can see that in any pontifical office when you're looking at the consecration of a bishop, etc. In the West, for example, you can find precism consecration rubrics where every bishop is considered a successor of St. Peter. So I would say,
did the fathers believe that Rome is a unique successor, like in a unique sense, where they have? I think
Pope
Leo talked about the rankings. There's not equality. Pope Leo has rankings of
right, but he bases them around St. Peter, but in that he includes Alexandria and Antioch. Like I don't want to be historically inaccurate by presenting this as a yes/no question. And what I mean by that is Rome was important in the history of the church. Rome had many, many saints, many martyrs, and many holy popes. So the idea that I can just say either yes or no, you get why it's problematic?
I get it. I have 2 minutes and I have other questions, so I'm sorry. So
okay, go ahead.
The Saint Cyril believed that the excommunication that Pope Celestine placed on Nestorius before any talks of a council was brought up, did he believe that would have been valid and licit and universal?
Absolutely.
Where did that excommunication come from?
The excommunication from Saint Celestine to Nestorius?
Yeah. Like, was that just from Saint Celestine, or was that in whose name was that excommunication from?
Well, I would argue that any anathema, especially one of that importance, etc., it comes from Christ ultimately.
Saint Cyril could have done it himself, but he didn't. Why did he go to Rome to do it? So Rome did it.
I thought Saint Cyril had, to some degree, privately done it because he had already started taking in. He started taking in parishes and people who were already fleeing from Nestorius. From what I understand,
the decree was from Rome alone. The excommunication came from Rome alone on Nestorius, and you said that he believes. Now let me just ask this one because I have 1 minute left.
Sure.
So what I presented, at least I think I presented, and folks can judge that. So we have a divinely instituted universal primate who sits on a single chair as a source of unity, who can teach infallibly and excommunicate other patriarchs outside his jurisdiction, has universal and supreme authority and power over all of God's churches, and this individual is found where in your church? That's what these fathers are saying. I'm quoting them
Yeah,
and proving these.
I would say that I don't agree with like half of what you said there. Because the idea there is no super bishop in the early church fathers, and even in the case with, say, for example, Saint Cyril going to the Pope was still in the seat of the center of Roman authority. So there is a value in having the Pope do it as opposed to Saint Cyril doing it. He
Good.
might arbitrate. Oh,
Last question. I
yeah,
think we're running out of time.
mhm,
Pope Agatha,
sure.
what did he mean by Rome will never fail, like undefiled unto the end?
Well, I think that I think he was speaking at. This is going to sound. I know you're not going to like this, but this is going to sound aspirational, considering that he had just dealt with Honorius.
All right. Thank you guys for that. All right. Father Joseph, you're up for your 20-minute examination of Elijah.
Okay, sure.
And I'll start your time as soon as you ask your first question.
Sure. Elijah, let's talk about Honorius, because that's something that we haven't gotten to yet, but it's important to it. And since my point is I'm on the negative side, I have to ask these questions. So
Sure.
first off, do you agree Honorius was a condemned heretic?
He was condemned. I don't agree he was a heretic. I think he was misunderstood. Just as St. Maximus taught that he was misunderstood. And the person that inscribed that letter that was condemned believed that he was misunderstood. But I do believe he was condemned at ecumenical council, and that's really all that matters in this discussion.
So in other words, okay, now did the Roman Church believe he was condemned as a heretic? Like, I mean then, not now. Because I know now there's like gymnastics and stuff. Back then, did they believe that?
Well, I don't think it's gymnastics. I mean, I think they literally say that it was for negligence. That's what the Pope say. But I will grant you the argument, and let's just say they all believe that he was a heretic. Let's just go with that.
Okay.
I'm okay. Let's go with that.
All right. So assuming he was a heretic, Saint Agatha understood him as a heretic, everyone understood him as a heretic. How can you claim the papacy is indefectible? I understand that the church is indefectible as a whole, but I don't understand it as specifically to one office. So I'd like you to explain a little bit on that, because we didn't really talk much about that.
Okay. So I appreciate you letting me do this, because this is a very important thing to answer. So I'll contrast Honorius with Pope Leo the Great, and I'll tell you why in a second.
Okay.
So when Pope Leo was asked the question of Christology, he answered the question directly and says Christ has two natures. He's human, he's God, and he's the Triune Unicus, right? And he took that tome, which is Tome of Leo, the famous tome, and he put it on the faithful to say, you have to believe this, or else you're not part of the Catholic Church, or you're not part of the Universal Church. So that was like a binding thing for him. It's final. This is a teaching. So he taught something, and it says you have to hold to this teaching. And if you don't hold to this teaching, then you are not part of this church, right? That's Pope Leo's ecclesiology, and we can quote him and show where he taught that. So now let's contrast that with Honorius, right? Honorius was asked the question whether they should teach one or two wills. What was his answer? He didn't say that he didn't say go teach two will or one will of Christ. He says do not teach one or two. So he left the question open. And then elsewhere in his letter, he makes a reference to Christ having one will, but that's not what he told. I think it was Sergius that he was writing to. That's not what he told him to go do with the letter. He didn't say, okay, now take this and bind the whole church to this. It wasn't like a universally binding decree that must be accepted or else you're not part of the church. That's not what Honorius's point was. He did not answer the question. He did not. He said one or two, don't talk about one or two. He says that in two places. And then in passing, he says Christ one will, right? But that's not his answer to say, go teach this, because it would contradict him saying, one or not one or not two. So the way that Rome's see is undefiled still, even with Honorius, is that it only applies to things that have universally binding dogmas, right? So Pope Leo had one. You could say Pope Agatha had one. You could say what's his name? Pope Hadrian had one. These are dogmatic and they are binding and universal. Honorius wrote a letter and did not answer the question, and it was a private letter and it remained private, and then he was condemned. There is no issue for a heretical pope for us. We could have
Okay.
a heretical pope. That's not an issue at all.
Okay. Well,
Take that heresy and bind the church to it. That would make it defiled. That thing would make it defiled.
okay. Just to be clear here, because I want to reiterate a couple of things and clarify some things. In the first place, clearly in the West before the schism, they were not nearly as defensive of Honorius. They viewed him as overthrowing the faith, even used terms like that. And as I mentioned, every single claimant to the papacy from then on literally had to anathematize him as a heretic. I do want to add some context with Pope St. Leo's tome. It is important to remember that in the context of the Council of Chalcedon, it had already been circulating for about a year or two.
Yep.
And when it went to the Council of Chalcedon, they did not simply accept it. And the famous quote, Peter has spoken through Leo, only occurred. And if you look in the Acts of Chalcedon, as each bishop looks at it, they had either read it or they had never read it. They're all saying different things. The point is that the church came to that consensus together. In other words, the power of the anathema. This is what I'm getting at here, is a spiritual one. When Pope Leo, Saint Leo speaks, for example, on the two natures, that is a spiritual thing. He's making a deep spiritual pronouncement about the truth of God. That is how I see it. It's not a special power on his part. He's confessing the Orthodox faith. So from my perspective, any bishop, and many bishops have throughout the world, issued similar powerful documents. And it's not an office. It's just being Orthodox and proclaiming it properly.
Right. Well, I mean, you got to ask a question. I
don't
mind.
I'm still
You
really
allowed
not good at that.
You allowed me to do that. I'm like,
all right,
that's
my
fine
turn.
with me.
Okay, let me ask this question. Now, I mentioned both Saint Chrysostom and Saint Augustine in their interpretations of Matthew 16:18 explicitly say Saint Peter is not the rock. That's Christ the rock. So I'm just curious as to how you interact with that, because you kind of introduced it as a kind of both and, but in reality, it's an and or.
Okay, so did I not quote Saint Jerome, who said that Peter is the rock?
You did, but that's not. I was talking about Chrysostom and Augustine saying he's not the rock.
Right, but now it's like, okay, my father can beat up your father, kind of thing. Like I'm saying, it's both in the early church. So you can see where some fathers said it was Peter's confession, and you can see where some fathers say that it was Peter himself who was the rock. I can't believe that we're in 2025 and we're still sitting here talking about whether Peter is the rock or not. The scholarship is moved on. Like this is like 1991 Catholic Answers apologetics at this point. This is like the fathers clearly taught that Peter was the rock, that Christ.
Well, I would argue that they didn't, and I pointed out multiple places where they didn't.
Okay, so you pointed out 2 places that they didn't, right?
Well, I actually pointed out 5 or 6, because if you point besides Chrysostom and Saint Chrysostom and Saint Augustine, there's Saint Hilary of Poitiers, who points to the faith being the rock. There's Saint Gregory of Nyssa in his sermon on the Advent, who points to the faith being the rock. Saint Ambrose in Book 6 on chapter 9 of Saint Luke. And he does it again in the epistle to the second chapter of the epistle to the Ephesians. Saint Jerome takes that interpretation himself in the 18th verse of the 16th chapter of Saint Matthew in his commentaries.
So Saint Jerome now doesn't believe that Peter is the rock. When I literally quoted him saying, "You are." Well,
he was addressing the Pope as the rock, but I'm saying that when you actually look at his biblical his commentaries, he actually says the faith the rock is
that proves more my point than your point. If he's saying that Peter's faith is a rock and still says that Peter is a rock, that says what I'm saying, which is both.
Well, but my point is that he is addressing somebody and he's trying to address them with love and respect, and I take that less than his actual commentary.
Okay, so we're picking and choosing what we take from the fathers now.
I think we're all doing that.
I don't think we're doing that. I mean, I'm quoting.
I think this is the most deep I've gotten with a Catholic opponent, so I'm very impressed. Good job.
Thank you. All right, so but go ahead. I mean, you got to ask me questions. So
okay. So that was a question I had. So let me let's see here. That's another question I had. Give me a second. Okay. So how do you explain, for example, let's see here. I'm trying to think, because I mean we're covering a lot of stuff. Can you accept the possibility, and excuse me if I say this, that popes have powers when they speak in an orthodox manner that don't stem from their office? In other words, if somebody is holy and learned and one of a holy, great, learned pope, and he says something holy, great, and learned, why the assumption that it's connected to the office?
That's a good question. That's a good question. The reason why I say it's connected to the office is because they apply the words of Christ to Peter to Rome. So on this rock I will build my church. The keys of and then talk about the keys. That I will give you the keys, and then they talk about feed my sheep, tend my lamb, and then they talk about Peter. Satan has tried to sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And the fathers take those three passages and they apply them to Rome. So it's inherent to it, to Rome. They're saying this is why Rome can never fail, because of Christ's promise. And that's literally what St. Maximus Confessor says. I mean, I could read it again if you'd like. Those are word for word his reasoning behind why Rome can't fail. It's not because Rome is the only Orthodox patriarchate at his time. It's because of the Christ promise to Peter that applies to Rome. That's his reason that he gives.
Okay. Well, I mean, and again, obviously, we've already disagreed on that, twice now. So, let
Right.
me see here now. If I'm trying to remember where it is, because in either Augustine or Chrysostom, in this very passage, what on earth?
You can get that if you want. We can take a pause. Just kidding.
All right, I
Sorry
guess.
about that. I'm back.
Okay, I was about to do some announcements. While you were away.
That's
Oh, you good,
ouch.
you good, man.
Hey, look, you need to advertise. There's a big event.
No, you good. You good. You good. All right, you guys continue.
Okay, so let me see here, because my points were, I think, fairly clear. Let me ask you a question. I brought up Hildebrand in the beginning, because this times with for lack of a better word, the great schism happening, that the investiture controversy was basically a countrywide war. There was a second pope, one who I consider the last venerable pope of the Orthodox Church, which was Clement III versus Hildebrand of Savannah. And I put up the Dictatus Papa. I have stated that. I've probably harped on that a billion times. But hold on one second. But the point is, how does that kind of resonate with you? The argument that, in fact, in the first 10 centuries and 11 centuries of the church, that the church was primarily decentralized, and we can pinpoint an origin to the concept of a monarchical papacy.
Well, I think my whole presentation disproves that point.
But I feel like it hadn't, but okay. So, how do you feel about the Dictatus Papae? Do you believe that it is reflected in the first 10 centuries of the church?
The Dictatus, well, some of it was, but not all of it. But the Dictatus Papam has absolutely zero magisterial weight. It's a nothing burger. It has no authority whatsoever, and it's not a magisterial document whatsoever. So I don't know why.
I've heard that before, but my real question is this: if it's not a magisterial document, and if I don't, can I put it up on the screen again, real quick, Marlon? 1 second, hold on. I want to put that on the screen, and I'd like to kind of discuss why it's important. All of these 27 theses that are put forth, to some degree, to a very large degree, I would add, all of them actually reflect in Roman canon law after the schism, and all of them reflect on actual papal behavior. In other words, I understand this was not proclaimed as a dogma, but it definitely works as a dogma.
But that's not just not a dogma. There is absolutely zero magisterial. Like, it's not even an ordinary magisterium document. It's not even It's
What about canon law? Is canon law ordinary magisterial documentation?
sure, but you got to show me canon law. You can't just say the canon law was basing it off Dictatus Papae. We don't even know who wrote Dictatus Papae. It wasn't even a
Yes, we
pope.
do. Hildebrand of Savannah. It was in the papal register in 1075.
Well, that's not a definitive thing. Like that's what we think maybe who wrote it, but not for sure who wrote it. There's no signature.
Well,
There's no name to it.
yeah, but then he also went to war with a bunch of different people on the basis of these teachings. So I mean, like it's really not a nothing burger. It's really the actual real formation of the Roman Catholic Church.
So,
Even
so you think that this has? I mean, I'm not supposed to ask you questions, so this turned into a cross examination. I just
oh,
want to
sorry. Okay,
like I just want a clarification. So, is your position here that you think that this has magisterial weight or authority?
I would say I would say that this, because this was actually not as well known as other types of documentation. I tend to put this more in the level of the origin, like church origin of Roman Catholicism.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to be offensive. I mean, but that this is where we see the papal the monarchy really form. Like these are the principles behind it. Look, I mean, look at, I can just pick one. 2015. He who is ordained by the Pope may preside over another church, but may not hold a subordinate position. Such person may not receive a higher clerical grade from any other bishop. I mean, that's just a determination of rank to a random person anywhere in the world. That is how the papacy operated from the 11th century after the schism and the controversy all the way to the 19th.
So there's no scholar that you can point to that's going to say that this is a magisterial document. That's just your opinion.
Well, it's not. I'm not claiming it's a magisterial document. I'm claiming it's a magisterial blueprint.
No, but I asked you, do you think this has magisterial authority or weight? And you said yes.
Well, because what I meant is that that's exactly how it was treated.
So let me just summarize what I think you're trying to say.
Okay.
What I think you're trying to say is this document is the sentiment of Rome at the time.
Well, it's the sentiment of the Hildebrandians who had to kill everyone else off, like, all the bishops who disagreed, the married priests, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Okay. So in the Catholic Church, the way we see what Rome teaches is you go to its councils, you go to its papal decrees and ex cathedrals, right? So where you go for that is Vatican I. So if you want to know what the papacy is, nothing here is dogma. Nothing here is dogma. Some things here could have truth in them, could be what we teach, but nothing here you can extrapolate dogma or doctrine from, right?
Okay,
Well,
so can I ask you a question then?
sure.
You know who Deus Dedit is, correct?
I don't.
Oh, okay. Deus Dedit, along with a couple of other well-known names, which are eluding me right now, after the Hildebrandian War, after Gregory VII in charge, etc., they were placed in charge of putting together the first collections of canon law, and those collections of canon law, some of it might have been reworked a little bit, but the whole point is it reflected the Dictatus. So even without the Dictatus, now you had canon law shaped in the very same way.
Well, I mean, you have to quote something. Like
Okay.
you have a canon law that
Sure.
says these things.
Okay, give me 1 second, okay? Because thanks to the age of ChatGPT, we can do that real easy. So, let's say let's take number
ChatGPT, but yeah.
Oh no, I know, but
Yeah.
I'm going to take number 3. The Pope alone can depose or reinstate bishops, because historically these things were done in a conciliar fashion. You had a court. A bishop got a hearing, etc. That's the proper canonical fashion that we're used to. But let me just see if I type in. Hold on.
Hey, Father Joseph.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we're asking questions, because it seems like we're just
right
free flowing a little bit too much. Let's try to ask Elijah some questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question to you is this:
Yeah.
Can you see in canon law the Dictatus's principles in not modern canon, not 83? I'm talking about previous to 83. So if we put this back on the screen, are you telling me you really can't see these things in post ecumenical and pre 1983 canon law? I would say they look pretty straightforward to me, but I'd like to hear your take on them, on the principles themselves.
So you mentioned one of the canons, or which one was number 15 or something, that the Pope can depose and reinstate bishops
At will, yeah.
At will, and you said that was done in a conciliar manner. I can point to you in the first millennium, in the first 4 centuries, where that was not done in a conciliar manner. And I would point to you Pope Julius and St. Athanasius case, where Athanasius was deposed by the Eastern bishops, and then he went to Rome, and Pope Julius reinstated him. There was no conciliar, universal,
Yeah, but in that particular case, as in the case of Saint John Chrysostom, those depositions were illegal. So the Pope was able to reinstate them officially because there was a legal basis for that. It wasn't because he had an extraordinary power.
So who says that because they were illegal? Why? But hold on, why were they illegal? Because Rome wasn't involved.
Well, no, that would mean Rome would have to be involved in every deposition, wouldn't it?
Well, if it's a patriarch, it's a patriarch. That's a major. That's why Saint Cyril went to Rome, because he can't excommunicate another patriarch without Rome consenting to it. So if it's a universal patriarch like of Alexandria or Antioch or Jerusalem, then of course you need Rome to ratify that. Just like I quoted from Zosiman, or I quoted from Saint Peter Chrysologus, you can't do anything that involves the universal church without the consent of Rome.
Wait a second. No, the reason it was illegal is not because it didn't have the consent of Rome. It's because of the fact that it wasn't following standard canonical procedure for deposition. But I'm just asking, do you believe that is, this is a question for you now, do you believe that in this concept of parallel monarchical structures, I know that it exists in Eastern Catholic canon law, that basically patriarchs are like, they're kind of like second, I don't know if they're second to the Pope or the Cardinals, I forget which they are now. But the point is, that they were all like these little monarchies, like mini popes,
in their own jurisdictions, yes, but not like mini popes of like the universal church.
I just see bishops as way more equal than that, so I'm just curious. Okay.
All right, that concludes the cross-examination. Thank you guys for that well-rounded cross-examination. Very, very, very in-depth, and we do all appreciate that. And so now what we're going to do, we're going to transition to our closing statements, which will be 5-minute closings for each party. Everyone in the live chat, if you have yet to do so, get your question in, because there'll be a 20-minute question Q&A after the debate has expired. And so obviously super chats as well get priority. So if you're super chatting, I appreciate that. You will get priority with the question. So with that said, a 5-minute closing. And let me make sure I get the time right here. And yep, you're ready to go. So it's your 5-minute closing, and Elijah, I'll start your time as soon as you begin to speak.
All right, let me get my timer up. Sorry about that. All right, so thank you so much, Father, for doing the debate. Thank you, Marlon, for moderating the debate. I think it was a good debate. And as far as my closing goes, I just want to summarize what the debate was. In the beginning, my presentation, I showed why the papacy is necessary, and in my opinion, and I think I hope the audience watching would agree. Obviously, that's what I'm trying to build a case for, is that the fathers taught that the Bishop of Rome's office is a divinely instituted one. They're not saying this in a broad manner, in a general manner, to say it's for the whole church that Christ instituted divinely. Obviously, that's true. Christ started the church. But in a unique sense, that Christ instituted the papacy in a unique sense. And that uniqueness makes all the difference. Okay, so we have to be true to what the fathers are saying. And I think I am being true because I'm reading what they're saying. And if you have to say, oh, well, this father at that time said this because of XYZ, well, they're no longer useful to us if we're going to have to kind of explain them away. The fathers are not there for us to explain away. The fathers are there for us to learn from. And if they say that Rome is instituted by Christ because of Matthew 16, because of the passages, the Petrine passages in the Gospel of John, feed my sheep, tend my lamb, because of the Luke passage of I have prayed for you so that that your faith may strengthen your brethren. I've prayed for you. Those passages over and over and over, from what I read from the fathers, from both West and East, apply those passages are applied to the Bishop of Rome, to the See of Rome, to the Pope himself. They're not applied in a general manner, right? The one thing I want to talk about real fast is the Saint Optatus example. And this is the logic of the fathers, especially in the West, where they say a head was chosen so that divisions may not arise, right? And Father said that he's only using Rome as an example. But if he's only using Rome as an example, that would obliterate his very logic. Because if Rome is not the only chair, the single chair, where the Bishop of Rome sits as a head to the members, as a head to the church, and you have multiple heads. So basically, what Father was saying is that every bishop is that Peter. If every bishop is that Peter, then that quote would make absolutely no sense. Where he says, "You cannot then deny that you do know that upon Peter, first in the city of Rome, was bestowed the episcopal cathedra, on which sat Peter, the head of all the apostles." So notice he's saying Rome, and he's saying Peter, and he's saying the head of the apostles. For which reason he was called Cephas, that in this one cathedra, unity should be preserved by all. He didn't say unity should be preserved by the regions that he has jurisdiction over, like the Bishop of Rome, or his direct jurisdiction over the West, right? That's his patriarchate. He says by all, lest the other apostles might claim each for himself separate cathedrals. So he's painting a picture. You have 12 apostles, right? And he's saying there's one of the apostles, Peter, was made head so that divisions may not arise. Okay.
All right, 1 minute.
So thank you. So that he who should set up a second cathedral against the unique cathedral would already be a schismatic and a sinner. If we're interpreting this as this chair belonging to everybody, well, he doesn't think this chair belongs to even all the apostles. He thinks that chair belongs to Peter as the head of the apostles. And sure, you can say that all the other bishops are some way, shape, or form a Peter, because they have authority over their diocese. At the end of the day, he is singling out Peter not for the reason of saying this applies to everyone. He's singling it out of Peter and is saying this applies to Rome alone. And so if the logic here is, if you have this single headship and there's a split in the church, you look to this headship to see where the church is, and wherever this chair sides with, that's where the true church is. And that's it for me. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for that closing. All right, Father Joseph, bring you back in. Okay. And you now have 5 minutes for your closing.
I just need a second. Give me 1 second, please. I'm losing my stuff here. Images. Right. Okay. Okay, let me just go to this one. All right. Now I gotta find just where'd my mic and pick thing go? Hold on. Okay, I think it might be here. Yeah, it is. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, sorry. So yeah, just I guess when we start, when you're ready to start, I will start.
Yep. When you begin to speak, I'll start your time.
Okay. So let's see here. I thought that was a very interesting. I thought that was a very interesting ending for Elijah, and I thought it really actually encapsulated the debate. I'm going to share this real quick. This is an old picture of the bark of Peter. This is a common Roman Catholic kind of view of the Pope is heading the ship, and so on and so forth, leading the church. But I have to contrast that. To how the Orthodox view of this is, and on that, hold on. I'm just going to share this kind of sales picture here. It's known as the ship of Christ, as in everyone is under the headship of Christ. Patriarchs, bishops, priests, deacons, they're under the ship of Christ. And I can't not point that out because it is absolutely central to this debate. In my opponent's interpretations, we saw that he would talk about how the fathers and saints referred to Peter as the rock. As I pointed out, many fathers, the majority actually, point to the faith of Peter as being the rock. The point is, Christ is the head of the ship. He is the head of the church. And so, we're his body. So these are fundamentally different understandings of what we mean by the headship of the church. It's not me that was saying every bishop was Peter, as Elijah said. It was actually the text used to consecrate bishops in the West before the 11th century. They were given the responsibility of Peter. That's in the text. That I didn't make that up. The problem with ultimately this line of argument is papal presuppositions about what the fathers mean only work if you already believe them. In that sense, understanding that, I know that, from his side, he'll have done great. From my side, people will say, okay, Father Joseph, got the context right, which is what I expected to do because none of these cases were new and it was great. But it is 2025 and truth still matters. And so if we're talking about whether the papacy is relevant, I think I think I answered the question pretty simply with a no, by pointing out that even before the Great Schism, bishops could be out of communion with the papacy for over 100 years, and ultimately, it wasn't until the creation of that monarchical system of that Dictatus Papae, which I will put up on the screen one more time because I want to make a point about it, that we see the formation of monarchical Roman Catholicism. Before that, bishops and episcopal sees and dioceses and metropolitans throughout the world existed independently because, as I mentioned with St. Ignatius, the bishop is the center of Eucharistic unity. He's the root of where the apostolic succession comes from. And so without that, we don't have a church. The bishops, as the successors to the apostles on the ship of Christ, are the ones who give the power of the mysteries to the priests, etc. And they are doing this in an unbroken succession from the time of the apostles. So from my, I think that when we look at this debate, I want to give props to Elijah.
1 minute.
Thank you. I want to give props to Elijah. I think somebody better could not have been found for this debate. I mean, he studied these things for over a decade, and we both know these subjects, and I have nothing but respect for him. But if it sounds like the conversation is still the same, it's because it is. It's been going on that way since the formation of the papacy in the 11th century as to what it is now. Convert to them or die. And I'm going to still choose, I'm going to stay on the ship of Christ, not Peter's, quote unquote, Peter's bark, because Peter's on the ship of Christ too. This is just, the medieval version of Peter. But in any case, I think this was a great debate. I'm glad we had it, and I hope people are enlightened by it and learn more and study the topics in them. So thank you, and may God bless you in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and thanks be to God.
All right, good stuff, guys. Appreciate you. And let me bring Elijah back in. All right, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for that debate. So let me do it this way. All right, that's much better. All right, so now we're going to go into Q&A from the audience. We do have a number of questions here. Audience, you get those questions in, and as I said, super chats get priority. So let me pull it. First, let me get this time right for the 20 minutes here. Make sure I get that right. All right, so we're gonna start our first question, and this question is a super chat here. And this question says, since the Eastern Orthodox, thank you for the super chat, thank you for the support as well, Daniel, definitely helps. Since the Eastern Orthodox rebelled against their own patriarchs after the Council of Florence, would that mean Eastern Orthodox are the first Protestants? I think it's questions for you, Father Joseph. What you got?
All right. Well, I think it was Call Me a Cove who said the Pope was the first Protestant. But I'm not a big fan of I don't want to spend time slurring the Protestants. I thought it was interesting as I went through the preparation for this to learn about the history of the Hussites, for example, who existed before Protestantism, and but they were rebelling against the Pope and they got killed. No, Orthodox, like the case of Saint Maximus the Confessor, like the case of Saint Photius, etc. St. Mark of Ephesus was just following a long tradition of if you're doing heretical evil stuff, you should get away from it. So yeah, that would be my take on the Council of Florence. A reminder that it was right after union with the Roman Catholic Church that the Ottomans won, and well, that also worked out for us. So all right, that's my answer. How about you, Elijah?
All right, Elijah.
I mean, I think it's harsh to say Protestant, right? I don't think I would call them Protestants, because for us as Catholics, we distinguish between apostolic churches and Protestants, right? So we believe that Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, Syrian Church of the East, they have valid sacraments, all 7 sacraments, and Protestants, we don't believe they have all valid sacraments. So I think that's just going too far to call them the first Protestants. But I understand what they're saying or they're asking, but I just don't think that's fair to say.
All right. I will allow since the questions for you, Joseph. You can have the last response to this question if you want.
Yeah, I will say if we're going to be technical, and I think the question of recognition of sacraments, we obviously Orthodox don't really, true Orthodox don't recognize Roman Catholic sacraments. That's the historical position, and it used to be vice versa because even though technically Roman Catholics do officially recognize baptism, they often used corrective baptisms and things like that in the early part of the 20th century and previous. So non-recognition is more the norm than the norm.
All right. Next question here, and all these super chats are for you, Father Joseph.
Oh boy! Oh no!
Yeah. Thank you for the support, Mark. Appreciate it. It's for Father Joseph. If Rome did not possess universal jurisdiction in the first millennium, why did Anatolius think that the confirmation of Canon 28 was reserved for Leo's confirmation?
Okay, we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about the 28th canon of I want to say Constantinople that was rejected in the West but preserved in the East. Eventually, 2 councils later, the popes did accept 28, and they did accept especially after 879, when there was that point where they had the kind of robber patriarchs at the 869 council. They did actually pass that canon. Just because they were all there. But the real question is, Canon 28 talks about, if I remember correctly, who is first in the taxes. The question of who is first, which used to be Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, became Rome, Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem. The Pope was protesting on that. Leo was protesting on that. None of it had to do with universal jurisdiction. It had to do with who ranked higher in the taxes.
All right. Mr. Elijah?
Well, I think they clearly believe that Leo had the authority to annul, or else they wouldn't have written to him asking him whether this can be accepted or not. So, yeah, I mean, we can do a whole show on this. So I'll just leave it there.
All right, Father Joseph, any final word?
Yeah, no, I think that answers the question of it didn't have anything to do with universal jurisdiction. Even if the argument one could make canonically is that Rome had universal appellate jurisdiction, but that's a specific type of jurisdiction that means that it's in case there isn't a higher authority to deal with it, then Rome can intervene at that point. I think everyone agrees on that historically.
All right. And once again, this is for question for you, Father Joseph. Super chat.
Oof.
Thank you so much, Alexander, for the question. Father Joseph, why appeal to Christendom? Am I saying that right?
Chrysostom.
Yeah,
Chrysostom, when his exegesis on Matthew 17 refutes you. The holy half shekel in Matthew 17 shows he was a papist. Matthew 17, 20, 26.
Okay. I don't even know how you get there. Like, let me just go to Matthew 17:20-26 to see what he's saying, because I'm completely confused. I'm sure I've read it. I just don't know how it says he's a papist.
Well, I
Is
think
it
he's
the
saying,
are you talking about the commentary on Matthew
yeah,
17?
he's the commentary from Chrysostom is what he's saying, not Matthew 17 itself. The
Okay,
exegesis.
well, I didn't address that because I was talking about Matthew 16:18. If you'd like, I can try to find it, and I can take a look, but I don't think it's going to convince me that he's a papist. Certainly, I think you're probably wrong on that anyway. But yeah, so that would be my answer.
All right, Mr. Elijah.
So I haven't read that, so I can't really comment on what I haven't read.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, Father Joseph. Anything else? Or
No.
I want to give you
I
the
feel like
last
the
word.
next. I'm getting the next question probably. So.
All right, no problem. No problem. And we'll make this question for Elijah. Elijah's sitting there too comfortable. He got to get pressed out too. He got to get pressed. He got to get pressed. So this question is for whoever. Thank you so much for the support. Appreciate it. Why would Augustine and all the African Episcopal, what was that, colleges,
Yeah,
I
probably
guess?
Episcopal colleges or
Yeah,
college. It could, yeah.
colleges. Their colleges will seek the Pope in order to condemn Pelagianism.
So that was actually a question for Father.
Oh, well, it says question for whoever wants to ask.
He said whoever wants to ask. You know, I was like, all
Oh,
right,
okay.
well,
Let me rephrase. That was a question I had for Father in my cross examination. I didn't get to, so I'm glad whoever this is asked it. So,
oh, what a coincidence. The answer to that would simply be obviously St. Augustine is referring to Rome because they are still the eldest patriarchate. They're still the center of the empire, and they want it to be made known all over the world that Pelagianism's bad.
So, yeah, I think this is a strong case for the papacy because they write to the Pope to end the controversy of Pelagianism, and the Pope writes letters to the North African bishops saying, condemning Pelagianism, and then they write letters to all the churches in the East and West condemning Pelagianism, and then in 431, Ephesus 431, they actually mention the Pope's letters saying that the popes already condemned Pelagianism, and that goes into the minutes of Ephesus 1. So the fathers at the Council of Ephesus 1 recognized papal jurisdiction and papal supremacy, where they recognized that what Pope of Rome condemned applies universally.
Can I ask just a minor clarifying question on that?
Okay, yeah, I guess this is your opportunity. So
yeah, because I would ask you. It's rhetorical, really. There were councils held in Africa and Carthage that we have in the Rudder, etc., condemning Pelagianism all before this. So they didn't need the Pope to stop Pelagianism. They did already, but they wanted to make sure that everybody knew it, which is where the Pope, as the center of unity at the time, would be useful. So the need for his help was to spread the destruction of that heresy because it was causing so much damage. And so they wanted to stomp it out. That's why they went to the Pope. It seems pretty self-evident.
All right, Elijah, any final words?
Well, I disagree. I think they couldn't stop it, and that's why they went to Rome to address it, saying, okay, just cut the head off the snake. So
well, that's what I was saying. But
yeah,
they did the condemnations already. They weren't asking the Pope to do it.
Right, but the reason why they went to the Pope is because they couldn't. It wasn't effective for them. Like, who are you, African bishops? You have no authority over us to say anything. So they go to Rome, who has higher authority than all of them, to settle the matter.
I think they might have thought a little more highly of themselves than that, but okay.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to the next question here. Thank you for the support, Daniel, once again, for the super chat. Have you read the canons of Sardica? Sardica, probably better. Sardica. Do you agree Photius was a heretic? Pope Nicholas was correct disposing for sitting on a already occupied chair?
Okay, first off, Daniel, I'd like to say thank you for your repeated donations. Yes, I have read the canons of Sardica. They have nothing to do with Saint Photius. Saint Photius was not a heretic. He's a saint of the church. Pope Nicholas was not correct in trying to intervene in the situation between Saint Photius and Saint Ignatius. Hope that helps.
All right. Mr. Elijah?
So I mean, this is a topic that we can have a debate in and of itself. Because So I mean, it's I'll just leave it there.
All right. Any final words?
No, good.
You're good. All right. So got a couple more questions here. And this question for Elijah here. Thank you, Nikki, for the question. Question for Elijah. In your debate with C.J. Cox, you said infallibility is seen in the phrase, the gates of hell shall not prevail. What does okay. All right. Castus Chul mean according to the lexicons?
I don't even know what that is, so maybe Father can help me here.
I don't know what that is, but I would say that with the gates of hell not prevailing, it's not a question of infallibility, but indefectibility. Got to make sure you get that right.
All right. Anything, Elijah?
No, I wish I knew what that was. I'm assuming it's Greek. I don't speak Greek, so
yeah, it's probably Greek. That's why I have a hard time pronouncing the Greek words. But I'm like,
it looks Greek.
Wrecking my brain with some of the Greek words I'm struggling with. All right, moving on to the next question here. This question is for Elijah as well. Nikki, thank you for the question. Where in the New Testament does Jesus unambiguously, speaking of the patron office, please don't appeal to Matthew 16:18, since Jesus said, on this rock, not on you, Peter?
Well, it doesn't matter what Elijah thinks. Like I said, I mean, I quoted the fathers of the church who interpreted Matthew 16 to mean the Bishop of Rome and the See of Rome. So if you don't like that answer, take it with the fathers. I don't know if this gentleman is a Protestant or not, but if he is, what I would say is we don't want to contrast the fathers of the church with the scriptures. You know, as Orthodox and as Christian and as Catholics, we don't look at it that way. We look at the interpretation of the fathers, or the interpretation of the scriptures from the fathers, versus the interpretation of the individual Protestant of the scriptures. And to me, I'm going to go with the fathers of the church, especially when they're unanimous in this. So they unanimously teach that the Matthew 16 applies to the Bishop of Rome, as I've shown in the passages that I read from the fathers. So that's more authoritative to me. Again, that's the scriptures. I'm not saying the scriptures are not important. The fathers are. I'm looking at the scriptures through the lens of the fathers, right, rather than through the lens of this Protestant or whoever this person is. I'm not sure what he is, but respectfully, I say that I'm not trying to be disrespectful to him.
Okay.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. No problem. I was going to say this. You're right in the sense that there is no patrine office that you see in the New Testament. However, this is interesting because he does assign Peter something. Obviously, he assigns him some kind of import. And this is why I've mentioned that St. Leo, for example, saw Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch as one see. You can even find that in the liturgical calendar. It says chair of St. Peter at Antioch, and it says chains of St. Peter in Rome. And it says, I think there's something of St. Peter and Alexandria related to sending John Mark. But the whole point is that Rome doesn't have a specific office in those early centuries. It is known for the generosity of its Christians because of the richness of the time. It's known for the place where Saints Peter and Paul were both martyred, and there were countless other martyrs. So there's a lot of importance that we can give to Rome historically, but they're not based in the Bible.
All right. Elijah, any final words?
I would just say again, the fathers completely and explicitly disagree with that. They looked at the office of Peter as being unique, just as Saint Optatus said. He set out one chair, Peter among the 12, and he bases it on Matthew 16. And they look at that office as being set up by Christ himself on Peter uniquely on the Bishop of Rome. Doesn't mean that all the other bishops are not Peter as well. There is there's truth to that. There's a sense of that, but there is a unique role of this headship of Peter being in one chair rather than in thousands of chairs.
All right. And going on to the next question here. This question is for both of you. So, yeah, I mean, every question is essentially for both of you in some way, I guess. But here's a question for both. Please explain how those two Maximus quotes are not compatible when read in the Roman sense. I'm not sure who wanted to. You want to take this first,
Yeah,
Father Joseph?
yeah. I mean, I'm going to be the one who's going to explain it's not compatible. I would argue Elijah would say it is compatible. And what I would say is this: that every point I tried to make with the life of Saint Maximus was that his loyalty to Rome was conditional upon Saint Martin's orthodoxy, and the moment that he thought that St. Martin would collapse or that the papacy would fall to monothelitism, he said, I will have nothing to do with them either. That is the real thinking of St. Maximus. That's what I would argue.
All right, Elijah.
As I said in the debate during the, I think there was a cross examination. You have his basis of Rome being infallible, or his basis of Rome having universal jurisdiction, or his basis of all of the prerogatives that he gives to Rome is simply on Christ's promise to Peter. It's not based on contingency of this or that. It's Christ's promise to Peter. That's what he bases it off of, and that's explicit in his words. So I respectfully disagree with Father there. I think it was based on the words of Christ.
All right. Final words, Father.
I feel like the purity of the Orthodox faith, which is what St. Maximus and so many other fathers was talking about, just the purity of the Christian faith, seems to really be downplayed when we're having these sort of arguments. I mean, if Rome lost the faith, I think that would be earth-shattering to St. Maximus. And so the whole point is, I think that that's a very big and important thing, is holding to the faith. I don't know why that would be lesser than like papal obedience of some sort.
All right. And we got a couple more questions here, and then we'll be able to shut this thing down here. All right, this question for Father Joseph. Thank you, Dr. Chris. I think I want to say that right, Dr. Chris. What piece of historical evidence would prove the papacy?
There's no piece of evidence that would disprove or prove the papacy exists. We know that. I think what you're asking is what piece of historical evidence would prove the papacy right? I mean, that's a weird question, because for me, the faith is what comes first. The Christian faith are what we believe. So effectively what you're asking me to do is like to produce a black swan. Like, what would make the filioque right? Well, the filioque is wrong. So there's nothing that would make it right. It's not that I'm trying to be mean about it. It's just that I would love to see Roman Catholicism reunite in truth with Orthodoxy, which would mean converting to Orthodoxy and dropping the heresies. But there's no way you have a false union with people who don't share what you believe. History has taught us that.
All right, Elijah.
Well, I would say that that's actually one of the questions I had on the cross-examination as well. I didn't get to, but I think it's a good question, because like if we're being asked to prove the papacy, I think the other side has to give us what would constitute as evidence. That's what the question is. So I think it's a fair question. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we're going to put it that way, then I would say when modern Roman Catholics can hold to the historical standard of St. Leo and St. Gregory and other holy popes like that were Orthodox, without just appealing to the fact that they are a papacy, as opposed to that they preach the truth, that would be the standard that we would use to prove the papacy. The Orthodox papacy and the post-1100s papacy aren't the same thing.
All right. Let me see here. We have a super chat here. Thank you, Orthodox traditionalists. Appreciate the question. That's for Father Joseph. For he that has built his church upon Peter's confession, Saint John Chrysostom.
Yep. This was my point throughout the debate, that the rock is Peter's faith. It's his confession of faith. It's not him personally.
All right, Elijah.
Yeah, I mean, we have no issue with saying it's Peter's faith. I just don't think there's a dichotomy there. It's Peter's faith, but it's Peter who says it. So the church is built on his faith and on him. That's the logic of the fathers. And you have fathers saying both. You have fathers saying it's this. You have another father saying it's that, or you have other fathers saying it's both of them. So there really is no issue, and I don't think this is a. Yeah, that's what I'll say.
All right, Father Joseph, you had a final word.
Yeah, on this one, I would say that it's a great quote, and you can find a lot of other ones. I did cite a work called Abba Gutierrez's The Papacy. It's sometimes known as Father Vladimir's The Papacy. That's where I got a number of those quotes. Even though I had read it, it's so convenient there to have like 17 or 18 fathers to work with to boot your search. So I recommend that.
All right, cool. That concludes the debate and the Q&A. And I thank you guys once again for a fantastic debate. Very, very informative debate. This is one of those debates where you got to go back, because I know I missed a whole bunch of stuff, and go back and rehash the stuff, man, and really dive in and study a little deeper. It's always fun, when you think you sort of know some things, and then you start hearing debates and conversation like, well, I didn't know that. So that's going to drive me to start studying a little deeper. So that's always fascinating. And I definitely got that from this debate. So I just want to thank you guys for, taking time out and being patient with the schedule as well. As I mentioned earlier, we're transitioning from California to Texas. It's been a roller coaster, literally, man, in some regards, man.
That's a good move. That's a good move. Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for hosting us, Marlon. This was a fantastic, fantastic debate. I really enjoyed being here, and I'm just grateful.
Yes, likewise. Thank you so much for both of you for being here as well, and for hosting, Marlon. Sure. You've been a great host.
Well, no problem. Now, I'll go give you guys some parting words. You already started the parting words already with that, but perhaps you guys have a little more departing words. Perhaps you could remind some people in the live chat where they can come check you guys out. So, Father Joseph, any departing words?
I think people know where to find me. NFTU, NFTU.net, NFTU on YouTube, or on X. We're there too, and talking nonstop. Been a little quiet because we were preparing for this, but we'll be back there tomorrow.
All right. Elijah?
Just on Underground Catholicism, that's my YouTube page. I also have a blog called Underground Catholicism. So, and then I'm also on X. If you just search Elijah Yasi, you'll find my account there.
You know what's funny? I just realized that his blog is called Underground Catholicism, and my website is NFT, which stands for Notes from the Underground.
Oh, nice! I didn't know that.
Excellent.
This was a very evenly matched match.
Good stuff. Well, guys, I'm going to let you go. You guys go ahead and enjoy the rest of your evening, and perhaps we could do this again sometime. All right, you guys go ahead.
That sounds great.
Right?
God bless everybody.
Glory to God.
All right, take care. God bless you guys.
Good night.
All right, guys, another fantastic debate in the books, man. And this was fun, right? And I hope you guys are was paying attention, man. I was paying attention, and obviously I'm blown away at the ability of the guys, man. I mean, that goes for a lot of debates too, man. I'm just totally blown away at the debating prowess of a lot of these guys who jump on the scene, and they're able to just get down with it. Debating is one of those things where even if you feel uncomfortable, even if you feel like you don't have a skill set, you'll be surprised how much of a skill set you actually have when you're actually engaging, right? Father Joseph mentioned earlier before he started the conversation, he said that the formal debate thing is not really his thing, right? That's not his thing. But as you can see, he actually engaged very well. Right. I think a part of it is just being well-rounded, having the knowledge to argue the points. And I think that in and of itself will help you become a very good debater and apologist in your area of study. And so with that, I really enjoyed the debate, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. It was fun, very educational. And a lot of times, even as you know, I'm a Protestant. And so Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox, I'm hearing them debate, and I'm like, oh man, I'm hearing Protestants mentioned, I'm like, grinning a little bit. But I think it's great to be able to sort of hold that, restrain your emotions, restrain the things that they say sometimes, and not get so riled up and being offended or anything like that. Because a lot of times with these debates, a lot of times we have to understand each other. right? So I'm a Protestant. Obviously, I disagree with Roman Catholicism and I disagree with Eastern Orthodox, but there are things that I can glean from by inviting two opposing views on from mine, right? And being able to say, you know what can I learn from the Eastern Orthodox? What can I learn from Roman Catholicism, right? And so that's why I love to bring guys on that I disagree with, because it's a very helpful tool to understand them, where are they coming from, right? And so that's a very, very, very extremely helpful way of understanding where individuals are coming from. And so I pray that if you're a Protestant in the live chat, that you took the same opportunity as I did to learn something new, right? Obviously, you're a Protestant, so you're like, man, ain't no way I would be Roman Catholic, and that's great, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, at the very least, you know, you learn something, right? You learn something just as I have. And so, all that said, I pray that you hit that like button before you leave the Gospel Truth. Also, thank you for everyone who super chatted here, and you guys don't understand how helpful that is. As you guys know, we are preparing for a conference next year, February 2026, TGT First Debate Conference. And so we're preparing for that. So every amount of money, whether it's $1 or $100, don't matter. Whatever it is just going to help the efforts monetarily to get this conference to the end, right? To see it all the way through. And so I'm definitely thankful for everyone that is helping with that monetarily to help tonight. And so all that said, I'm going to let you guys go. Once again, I appreciate you guys. Don't leave the channel without hitting that like button and a subscribe button and a notification bell so you miss out any shows that are coming up here in the future. And I'll see you next time. Next week, I believe I have another debate. So I'll see you next week. May God bless you. May God keep you. Talk to you soon. Bye.